Tuesday, July 4th, 2023, Watkins Jail, Phoenix, Arizona. After going through the fifth door in the jail, I heard this boom, boom, boom noise. At first I thought they were playing music with a lot of bass, but then I thought, no, I've never heard music playing in the corridors of the jail before. Then I wondered if maybe they were doing some sort of construction. And then I thought maybe the med lady was pushing her cart around with a flat tire. As I rounded the corner to go to the pods, there were about a half dozen officers standing in front of the solitary confinement cells. There was an inmate banging on one of the doors really hard. The whole door shuddered each time he hit it. The officers all just looked at me as I walked by, and then one of them yelled at the inmate that if he didn't quit it, they would go in and shackle him. The inmate hit the door 2 more times and then stopped. In my 1240 class in Pod 3D, we introduced ourselves as Sons of God. One of the men, Aaron, was rather despondent. Instead of introducing himself as Aaron, Son of God, he introduced himself as Aaron, I don't know. I told him it was okay. He was always welcome in my class. For the most part, the men I visited for the first 17 years in maximum security hated women. For the next 2 years in medium security, the men's attitude towards women was whatever. For the last 6 years, the men I've worked with in minimum security have been trying to repair relationships with the women in their lives. Mothers, grandmothers, wives, girlfriends, sisters, daughters, etc. After explaining this phenomenon, I told the men not to raise their hands, but to think about what category they were in, and what relationships in their lives needed mending. Half the men just looked at the floor, and the other half nodded their head. We listened to I Can Only Imagine, and When You Believe, performed by BYU Noteworthy. The men were enchanted by the videos. In my second class at 105, in 4A, I had one man, Brandon. He said the opening prayer, we sang a hymn, and watched the music videos. Brandon goes to court tomorrow. He said all he had been praying for was justice, whether that meant being set free or going to prison. Brandon said he was not a member, but his mother, who passed away 13 years ago, was. 15 men came to the 130 class in 2A. As the black man in the turban came in, he started arguing with the officer. I guess turbans aren't allowed because a weapon can be hidden in them. He finally took off the turban, the officer left, and we started class. As we introduced ourselves, the man, now without the turban, was very angry. After describing men's attitudes towards women in maximum, medium, and minimum, he was even more angry. I told the men the following account. Friday, October 9, 2013. Today it was my lot to have to deal with a very unpleasant guard. At first he let me know that it was very inconvenient that I was even there. He finally let me into the classroom in Pod 2E200, locked the door, but did not call out for the inmates to come to services. I started to get anxious after being locked in for about 15 minutes. At that point, a very clear and calming voice told me, wait. So I sat down and started going over the lesson. After being locked in for about half an hour, different inmates started to come up and talk to me through the glass. One wanted to know if I was okay. Another apologized for the guard being rude and said that this particular guard was mean to everyone. Another asked which church I represented. After an hour and a half, the guard reappeared and opened the door. A man named Adam, that had watched the whole incident, came and asked if he could meet with me. I told Adam that he was welcome in my class. The guard let him in, locked the door, and we got started. After we sang and had a prayer, I asked Adam, "Have you ever heard of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?" He said no. "Have you ever heard of Joseph Smith?" No. "Have you ever heard of the Book of Mormon?" No. For the next hour, Adam and I had a one-on-one gospel conversation. Adam asked if I would come back next week to talk more with him. I said I would. When our time was up, the guard, who was still in a bad mood, opened the door. I thanked him and left. Back to the present. I told the men I had a choice. I could have been mad at the officer or focused on having the Holy Spirit with me. Most of the men agreed that my meeting with Adam was way more important than being mad at the guard. But my man without the turban was not convinced. He was still determined to be mad. I watched the men as the music videos were playing. The man without the turban only got angrier. Halfway through the video, he started slow clapping, got up, scowled at everyone, and stomped out of the room. The man that introduced himself last week as Tom, abandoned son of God, was crying. The rest of the men were at peace, enjoying the music. The facility commander was in the pod when I came out of the classroom, and boy did she look tough. I didn't see the man without the turban. I'm guessing his attitude brought the commander and got him thrown into solitary confinement. It was very funny to see the commander when we were leaving the pod at the same time, and an inmate came up and said, "Have a happy 4th of July." After the initial shock on her face of an inmate saying something nice to her, we looked at each other and smiled. We both knew the man was talking to me, not her. I shook my head and said, if only they could behave as well as they do in my class, they wouldn't be in here. She nodded her head in agreement.